name is Nouri Sardar, humble servant of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Born into a Pakistani Sunni family, a very loving family. May Allah keep them, inshallah. Third generation British. We've been honored that we have two esteemed characters in our family, both from the Sunni scholarly side and the secular side. I was born Muslim, alhamdulillah, and raised in a very religious household. I chose to follow the path of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam in 2006 when I was 15. I don't remember the exact time where I came across the story of Ashura. I remember when I was young, my best friend was Shia Muslim, and he always used to speak about certain events in history to do with Imam Ali alayhi salam, and I assumed that Imam Hussein and Ashura came up in one of those stories. I do remember reading a book that he had about the story of Karbala in history, starting all the way from the time of Umayyah and moving on to Abdul Muttalib, and looking at the two family trees and how eventually they met at Karbala in the form of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and Yazid. So I was well aware of the story for some time, even if I only didn't know it in depth. I knew the basic concept and idea of the story and what had happened. I do remember when Muharram would come, it would be made known to me that it was a time of mourning, a time to wear black, a time where, for example, life changes. You don't watch TV, you don't go cinema, you don't go out. So these kind of small compasses that pointed towards the idea that there is a Muharram, there is a story of Ashura, a sad story, were there with me for quite some time. I always see the month or the 10 days of Muharram and Ashura as the main part of the year. I remember I wrote a short verse of poetry which says, I've waited 355 days for my eye to shed this tear. These 10 days are like a Kaaba, and around it circles the year. Because truly, that's how I see it. It's like the 10 days of Muharram are everything to me. In that many ways, it's a time where you evolve as a person. And I found that every year, alhamdulillah, through the love of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and the lessons that you learn from that day of Ashura, I find myself evolving in life in many different ways, be it through my akhlaq, my maturity, the way I see life. So definitely, I would say that every year I evolve. I would also say that everything in my life that I have, alhamdulillah, whatever it may be, the minute things that I may hold pride in, or the great gifts I've been given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, I would say all of it is owed to that 10 days. In that 10 days, much like many of the servants of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, there is nothing that I do that really benefits myself. I do everything I can for the Imam. I know there's times where in those 10 days I'm working on distributing an album, if I have an album, writing poetry for reciters, as well as working at Ahlul Bayt TV, editing and producing. And even though these are very small things, they're not really worth mentioning, but my point is that Imam Hussein has driven me to this point where I just spend all those hours working for the Imam, because even though he died, even though that day was over 1,300 years ago, we always say, "Oh Hussein, we wish we were with you," and the only way I can show that in my actions is by the little that I can do in those 10 days. I would say there were two big factors, or three big factors, to my deciding to follow the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. The first would be witnessing Dua Kumail and the words of the worship of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and seeing how, not just that, witnessing that the Shia worship God alone, but seeing how they worship God. through these amazing prayers that you can't find anywhere else. The second would be, I would say, reading the sources of the tragedy of Fatima Zahra alayhi salam in Sunni sources and history books. Countless narrations clearly saying what happened to Fatima Zahra alayhi salam on that day when her house was attacked. And the third definitely would be my experiences to do with Imam Hussein alayhi salam and attending those majalis. I cannot explain why I felt the need to go there. I cannot tell you there was a specific story that I heard that inspired me, or anything like that. I think for me, alhamdulillah, I was raised in a house where you were always taught to be God-fearing and be pure and be humble. These things that I was brought up with were so apparent to me in the story of Ashura. They were so obvious that this was like the magnet of all those things, and therefore it was the magnet to myself. So I was automatically drawn to it. Alhamdulillah. So I think it's a simple matter of being God conscious, fearful of God, and spiritual. And if you are those things, then automatically the story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam will touch you. And I mean, there's even academics, I remember, saying that the story of Hussein will make even the most hard-hearted person cry. So automatically I was drawn to it, and I could say that was a big factor in becoming a Shia. And I think one aspect of it, definitely for sure, like I said before, when you're sitting in that majlis and you feel like you're a part of this movement mourning Imam Hussein alayhi salam, that position is a massive honor. And I would definitely say that a big part of me becoming Shia is to grab hold onto that honor and that pride of being there for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, of being part of that movement that is the Husseini movement. So definitely I would call that a big factor in my decision to become Shia. What's beautiful about the commemoration of Muharram, alhamdulillah, we're blessed to be here in London, and London is known as, they call it the Karbala of the West. It's the one place where during the 10 days you can walk around and see Imam Hussein flags everywhere you are. You can see majalis everywhere. You can see thousands of people commemorating the Imam and his tragedy. So in terms of the commemoration itself, I wouldn't say there's one particular thing that attracts me the most, but what's beautiful about it is that it's so diverse. You see people who are working so hard and sacrificing to put the name of Hussein alayhi salam all over the city, and in the form of Who is Hussein billboards and banners, and you see people giving out water to people on the street, and roses in the name of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, with sayings of Imam Hussein alayhi salam attached to these things. You see people that are working tirelessly at television channels, trying to broadcast the message of Hussein, and also you see the majalis, which subhanallah are so rampacked out. It's difficult, as the years have gone past and the lovers of Hussein have grown so much more. It's difficult to, by the 3rd or 4th of Muharram, get a seat if you are 5 minutes coming 5 minutes before the lecture even starts. So when you enter these majalis, it's as if you entered the desert of Karbala in those 10 days. It's as if you're there. And there's a feeling that cannot be described in any words that I say. It cannot be described in anything that may be shown on TV or any poetry that any of us may write. But subhanallah, it's as if we are all bonded together and we're there to mourn this great tragedy. It's simply indescribable. I mean, to answer your question, there's nothing I can pinpoint. I love the 10 days of Muharram. I love it in a bittersweet way, in that, for example, Ashura, I try, especially recently, not to smile, not to shake hands, not to joke around, because it's a very, very sad day, and you feel it. You feel the immensity of that day on your shoulders and on your heart. So I love it, but at the same time, it breaks my heart. All the characters of Day of Ashura are inspirational. I think what's interesting is that every year you come back, you attach yourself to a different character. So one year, for example, you might be heartbroken by the story of Fatima Sughra. One year you might be heartbroken and inspired by the loneliness and the courage and the defiance of Muslim ibn Aqil. You might be heartbroken by the story of Qasim, by Ali al-Akbar or Ali Asghar. But for me, definitely, my inspiration will always be alongside Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Abu Fadl Abbas alayhi salam. Why? Because he represented all the virtues that we aspire to achieve on that day. He is so attractive in the way that he was selfless. I mean, attractive in terms of his virtues. It's impossible not to fall in love with what he did, especially knowing that he did it, just between himself and the water. And we don't believe that these people on the day of Ashura are dead at all. We believe they are alive. They are here. They're watching. I have no doubt that Abu Fadl Abbas is watching me and us right now and seeing what we're saying about him. And I have no doubt that these characters and these phenomenal personalities are still helping us every step of the way. Especially in my life, I can say that Al-Abbas has always been there for me as a carer. You could even say as a uncle. So my connection with him is something that I can't really portray in words, but it's definitely something that is there and will always be there, inshallah. I tried to visit Karbala for a long time, and I kept trying to visit, but I was always relying on friends and people to kind of take me and guide me. Eventually it came to a point where, and it was always very heartbreaking to see friends that were going to Karbala. Anyone who hasn't been to Karbala will know exactly what I'm talking about. The fact that you're dying to go and you see people around you always going. And I've written a lot of poetry talking about this kind of feeling. But it came to a point where I just kind of made a promise to myself that I'm going, regardless of who goes with me or what happens. I literally just booked the ticket and managed to sort out a visa, and I flew. It was Arba'een of 2011, and I had no idea what to expect, to be honest with you. Seeing the shrine for the first time, you kind of paint a picture in your head that when you see the shrine, you'll be torn into pieces, or you'll just die there and then. But I had no idea what to expect. All I knew was that I needed to get to the shrine as soon as possible. So after doing Ziyarah in Najaf, and I was all alone, I literally just started walking to Karbala. One thing I would say about Karbala is that beyond that first Ziyarah, when you meet your masters for the first time, what's really beautiful about it and what people don't really talk about is the fact that it grows on you every day. It's like, for example, you get to heaven. You won't realize what it's like being outside of heaven until you leave it. But I do remember the feeling of visiting Al-Abbas for the first time, and I do remember the feeling of visiting Imam Hussein for the first time. It's a feeling that is so powerful, and a memory that is so powerful that it still revisits me in my dreams all the time. There are many times where I dream that I am there, and it's not a dream as in one that is like any other dream. It's a dream as if your soul left your body, went to do the ziyarah, and then came back and you feel it. And I remember one of the wishes I had for Imam Hussein and I had 3 wishes. They say the first time you see the shrine, you have 3 wishes that are granted. One of those wishes was, oh Imam, I always want to come back here. And alhamdulillah, since then, up till now, it's been about 8 or 9 times within 4 or 5 years. I've been blessed with the honor of visiting Karbala. And just like it is with Muharram, when you evolve and you grow every Muharram, every time I go back to the Imam, I go back as a new person, as a grown person. I have different things to request from him for myself. I have different conversations with the Imam all the time. I think now it's come to a point where, subhanallah, I mean, it was only 5-6 years ago where I never even knew what Karbala smelled like, but now it's got to a point where when I go there, it's so familiar to me that, especially when it's Arba'in, I try to not do ziyarah as much to allow the millions to experience their own ziyarah, because I feel like it's my home. And I feel like the Imam knows that I'm there, and he knows that I've come. And it's like the Imam is telling me, I can see you, I know you're there, and I appreciate you coming, and I don't feel obliged to do the actual ziyarah every day to allow the other ziwar to do their ziyarah, because it's like my home. Alhamdulillah, it's got to a point where when I get to Karbala, it's not like a feeling where I've been deprived for so long and I've finally seen the shrine. It's more of a feeling of coming back home and seeing that familiar shrine for the once again, and being there to do the work of the Imam. Alhamdulillah, I remember last Arba'in when we went for filming for Ahl Bayt TV, and it was very different because we were doing the work of the Imam. It wasn't like, even though we even sacrificed many opportunities to do ziyarah, but it was okay because we were there working for the Imam, and it genuinely felt like we were the Ansar, or alongside the Ansar, or serving the or something in that category of serving the Imam. And it's amazing because we are doing his duty, but you always kind of get these experiences and these moments in Karbala that it's like the Imam is telling you, thank you for the work you're doing. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I mean, I've had many experiences of once, my second ziyarah, I still remember my farewell to the shrine was kissing the dome of Imam Hussein, and that kind of just came out of nowhere. I remember another time where we went to do our final ziyarah a few years later, and the doors were closed, but I managed to speak to one of the workers of the shrine, and he let us inside where the dharih was, and it was completely empty, and we got the shrine of Imam Hussein all to ourselves. When we were filming for Ahl Bayt TV last year, I remember we got chances to go onto the roof to film, and I got a chance to film the Mawaqib as they were entering the actual shrine. And I don't see these things as coincidences. I see it as like a privilege from the Imam. The Imam is telling you, I know what you're doing. I'm thankful for that little that I'm doing. I'm thankful for that work you're doing. I'm going to show you that I appreciate what you're doing. Like I said, the Imam is living for me, and whenever I go there, I can feel his appreciation, and that is something that I can, no matter what I do or what I say, I can never be thankful enough. The lessons I take from, or try to take from the story of Ashura, are the ones that all of us try to take from that day: patience, selflessness, love, sacrifice, brotherhood, all of these values and virtues that are in that day. But I think the most important thing is the humility and the submission to God and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And underneath that is the loyalty to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Definitely, I would say that the fact that we come back every year and we mourn the same story, we are, even if subconsciously, we are taking these lessons on board in our lives. And every day, for example, if I have the feeling or the desire to backbite, for example, and suddenly I think, don't do it. That is automatically a story I've learned from Ashura. If I want to oppress someone, but something inside tells me don't do it, that's a story I've learned from Ashura. If I want to be humble or selfless, these are stories lessons that I've learned from Ashura. There's even been times in my life where I've had to be very, very selfless, and straight away I remember that story of Imam Abbas alayhi salam, and when he had the water in his hands and he threw it away, and it's like that story just plays in my mind, and there's a voice in my head telling myself, you say you love Abbas, you say you love the story, and now the opportunity presents itself to you. What are you going to do? So automatically, you have to submit. I think it's sad that so many people, they're the first people to do majalis and the first people to cry for Imam Hussein, the first people to do martyr for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, but they don't take the lessons on board from Imam Hussein alayhi salam. It's like Imam Hussein alayhi salam is for the mosque, but outside the mosque they have their own kind of lives and values that they abide by, which are completely separate from the lessons of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and what was learned on that day. So me personally, I always tell myself in anything that I do in life, whatever it may be, I always tell myself, there's only one truth. There's only one right thing to do. When you're given options, there's only one right thing to do. And I always, I take my entire code of character, my entire code of living, whatever, I define what's right and wrong by the day of Ashura. And I always tell myself, not that I'm saying that I'm perfect, we are all imperfect. We've all got our imperfections and our sins, and I'm a sinner. But I would say that I try, inshallah, in terms of the way I live my life, to take from that story of Ashura and live my life accordingly. To explain the story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam to a non-Muslim, I think that when you look at the way non-Muslims are exposed to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, especially with rebirths, and the show of course is called Reborn, and I'm sure you hear many stories of how people were exposed to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, but interestingly, no one is exposed to Imam Hussein alayhi salam the same way. There are people that they see, they've seen a picture of the millions visiting the shrine and they just become Muslim straight away. There are people that they hear the story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, but they need to study and research and look into it for years before they finally accept Islam. Not that the one who hears the story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam has to become Muslim, but it's interesting to see that everyone is introduced to Imam Hussein alayhi salam in a different way. I've seen people that see the commemoration of Imam, the martyr, the crying, the lamenting, and they're intrigued by it. They're brought closer to it. I've seen people who are introduced to Imam Hussein alayhi salam through these billboards that you have, Who is Hussein, and the 10th Day, and many other Stand for Hussein in Norway. All of these great organizations that are doing amazing work trying to put forward the message of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. But one thing I've found so amazing, especially recently when I've alhamdulillah traveled to a lot of places, I've seen Imam Hussein alayhi salam in the furthest reaches of the world where you never expect him to be. I've seen him in a small tiny mosque in the ghetto of Barcelona. I've seen Imam Hussein alayhi salam in the most dangerous ghetto of Southeast Washington. And I see people that are inspired by Imam Hussein alayhi salam in all these areas. So I would say, if I were to tell a non-Muslim about Imam Hussein alayhi salam, I would tell them that Imam Hussein stood up for everyone. He stood up for the innocent, and he stood up against the face of injustice and tyranny. He brought his women with him, he brought his children with him, and he sacrificed them all for the greater good. As Imam Hussein alayhi salam says, to be honest with you, the one quote I would give them is the quote where he says, even if you do not believe in God in this world, at least be a free man. That's, I think, what I would tell anyone who asks me about the story of Imam Hussein alayhi salam.